This is going to be another episode, the third episode, actually, of Hot Take Point Made, League of Legends edition, which I will say at the beginning, obviously I'm joined by the usual suspects because it will be the same three people for every show. There's Keire from my Discord /EuroLeague /content/ saying stuff on Twitter that makes people really upset who think they know the LPL and LCK, and also the whole time pull off the old man mask. Secretly, he was just a Dota fan the whole time. Just absolutely memeing on you all, didn't even give a fuck about this child game Valorante, like as we do in CS. That's what he's doing. Dota All-Stars clone, not even the good one. That's what his real base take behind it all was that. So you should have hated him from day one anyway. I shouldn't even have waited till episode 3 to reveal. I should have revealed that like episode 100 to really tilt him, but whatever. It's out there now. Mate. Right, and then obviously Zaboutine's here. If you didn't know, I never actually did mention on the last one. He has coached teams like Immortals, Optic, etc. in the LCS, and then he obviously did all the work with OTP over in France, if you speak French. If you speak French, you don't need me to tell you that. And also, you're probably, like, your ears probably perked up as you were typing the hate comment to me in the YouTube comment section. Like, oh, wait a minute, is he talking to me? What the hell? All right, okay, I didn't know we knew he existed. I did. And also, the joke would be, Zaboutine, here's the obvious joke for me. I actually do like you, but my joke would be, for me, you're the best of the French commentators. But then again, my old joke would be, that's like being the prettiest waitress at Denny's. It's like, you know what? It's not a catwalk, is it? You know what I mean?
I don't know how I can take that.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. Exactly.
Thank you for the compliment. You know, I'm going to take the compliment. Okay. That's it.
Yes.
Thanks.
And to be fair, obviously I don't speak fluent French. So I actually have no idea how good the other cats are. I just don't like some of them because they beef with me on Twitter. So whatever. It's all good on that one. It's just a shot across the bow. So obviously, I will say at the outset, boys, I thought in CS when I made this concept, I knew it would go down really well in CS because people really like, it's 24/7 hot take culture in Counter-Strike if you don't know. But obviously you can imagine everyone gets flamed on that show. I think this show has ascended to a level I've never seen before. Like, it's not like I'm even talking about the Twitter replies. Our own reply. Like, by the way, if you're one of the 3 people in this show, don't ever go in the comment section of our videos. Like, our own fans hate us so much. As far as I can tell, even the people watching the show think everything we say is wrong. So in a way, we're killing it, guys. It actually proves the concept is working. But it is kind of wild, isn't it? Scouting it. This is my own fan. This is like Last Free Nation fans. They hate us too. What do you think? Come on.
I just don't get I think the prompt of the show was pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
To come with hot takes.
Exactly.
So it's not like we're firm, we're not like, we know our takes are hot and we're trying to defend them, right? There is kind of a game, right? There is an underlying game. Like, guys, we're not like 100% dead set. It's not every single time it's the hill we're gonna die on. The point is to argue for have things to argue against in a way that it creates an engaging conversation among us and among us and you.
Yes.
And I read the comments. It's like, how does this guy think that? I'm like, I guess you didn't read the title, man. Yes. I'm sorry.
No, you are right, by the way. I've noticed you've actually already picked up on the meta game of why the show works, Zaboutine. The real reason the show is funny is it's almost like, unless it's like one where we're just trying to provoke fans. In general, what each person's doing, guys, is sort of trying to get away with a really mental take to the other two. And half the game, like you say, is just like, can the other people actually poke enough holes in it that they make you sort of admit, like, all right, maybe I was full of shit on that one. You know what I mean? Like, and if they can't, in a way, even if because the other thing is, like you implied that, no one actually really 100% believes all these takes, guys. Like, the whole point of some of them even being hot takes is actually in a month or depending on when we do the episodes, like if a playoff series had happened. Like, I'll give you an example. What if I'd done a hot take? I could have done it as a hot take right before the LCK. Like, GenG is the best team to ever play. Well, that would now be something even I don't believe necessarily right now, would it? So I do think, but yeah, it's all right. Luckily, as I pointed out about the CS one, in a way, the genius of this show is if someone gets really upset and overreacts to the hot take, that's sort of a feature, not a bug when it comes to this show. You know what I mean? So in a way, it works anyway. So the first question is this: who has the opening hot take? Because luckily, we do seem to quite uniformly be hated on this show, so anyone can start on this one. It's not like other shows where it's just Maui gets it all or whatever. Who's got the first hot take? Keire?
I feel like I've got the comment at the back of you here, Thorin. GenG can still be the greatest team of all time.
I saw it. See, I did. You're all going to think at home that was like some, we had like some production meeting earlier in the week, and I was like, I'll cue you up, Keire. I'll say it. Like, obviously, they're not now. No, believe it or not, I think that might even have been a real take he had. So come on then. Right, hit me with how GenG, Keire, who I will remind you, basically just lost to the old GenG without Jovi. Let me explain to me how that is the greatest team. What hit me with that? I'm ready. I'm strapped in.
Okay, so first of all, you've got to look at not just the individual dominance. Okay, a team, the same way as a player's career, a team is consistently made up of totality. You look at all the records they broke in LCK domestic splits. They won Spring and MSI. Okay. At MSI, they were unbelievably dominant, and they made the second best team of the era look terrible. As in, like, BLG didn't even look like remotely good against them in the finals.
That's true.
Whatsoever. Now, you can still be one of the greatest teams of any era, and this has been illustrated by T1. T1 of 2016 is considered by one of the greatest teams of all time, in some people's opinion, the best.
Yeah.
They didn't even make the semi-finals. They got reverse swept by a KT that no one really considered elite at the time because they just changed their mid laner. And it was in shocking fashion, and Rox Tigers then ended up winning Summer, but then they won Worlds and solidified their era. Now, if you take the context, for me, GenG has to now win Worlds. That is like a given. But in doing that, even the fact that they've not done the Golden Road thing, I still think they would have a real good shot at being the best team of all time. The whole year round, not counting EWC, they've lost like 3 series, 2 BO3s to KT because they're like dark artists, and then they lost that one series in the final. Now, if you watch the final, it's not, apart from the narrative, it's not the best LCK final ever. It's more coming down to a lot of like player errors rather than like great upstart play and stuff like that. But they still were in the final, and the key point is they had actually previously beaten HLE in the upper bracket.
Yeah.
Had they lost see, the context is had they lost twice to HLE in both sides of the bracket, and HLE had beaten them convincingly both like times, then I wouldn't be making this point, right? Okay, but and Thorin, you know this as well from other esports, great players are allowed to lose. Like, you don't have to be undefeated like all the time. Sure. That is a complete like mythos and like something that people have looked, because there's so few tournaments in League of Legends, people who really nail down in the individual big finals, which makes for, the people who win them all, they look epic. But if you look at the continuity end, all joined together, what GenG's done is unbelievable. Like, I personally think, like, what they've done right now in its own way is more impressive than JDG was up to this point. Because I watched JDG scrape by on their
team. There's a lot of close games, yeah, for sure.
So many times, whereas like GenG is just like absolute scorched earth policy. 3-1, 3-0, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-0. It was how dominant they have been, and then everyone's obviously taken this very small thing and blown it up.
You know what? I have to say, I want you to go first, Tim. Actually, he made that was one of the more reasonable, like, Keire breakdowns. He was spitting. What do you think?
I think it's not a bad argumentation for it. I think that in my mind, in my framework, I think that 2015 SKT was still like probably over the course of a year the most dominant team I've seen, because they lost in Game 5 at MSI. Outside for that, they weren't as dominant in regular season. I think GenG is one of the strongest. The last 2 years, GenG has been one of the most strongest regular season teams ever. But the fact that they almost clean swept the Worlds in 2015, right? They lost like one game to the Rox Tigers, and I think they lost the second one, right? No, and that was about it. Yeah, it was really like nuts how dominant they were. Like, nobody felt at any point they could be beaten whatsoever. It really felt like the kind of, it was the strongest team of that era. I think the game evolved past that point. I think even 2016, 2017, it's like an intermediate era of the game. But on this, like, I would say 2013 to 2015, it was really like on this set meta and this set way of playing the game. They were like really the prime time of what SKT1 was in my mind. So I would still like say they are one game away. But you can still advocate that in the modern era, they're the best team, and the best team of the modern era is the best. The problem, and I know I'm going to be hit for that, but I think that now that we're like kind of walking a small thread on this, it's like the EWC comes back, and it's not like the results at the WC, it's the manner. I think that's partaking into another tournament and losing there and not being able to win the home trophy, which is the easiest normally, right? On the like home trophy, and then international tournaments are harder. I think that tripping there and tripping home prior to going to Worlds, the only reason I would advocate for your take would be if they actually can sweep Worlds the way T1 did in 2015. Like if they lose one single game, or they lose no game at all, like they do the perfect Worlds, then there would be a question. It's like, okay, they lost 2 games, like 1 game in the regular circuit and 1 game in the like fandom tournament outside of the regular circuit. But they won pretty much all the other games aside from 2 series in the regular seasons. Then I would advocate for that. But for now, I would say they're more like losing the status of best team of all time because of like multiple losses at stakes that were lower than the major events. And the only thing they have for themselves is the like dominant win and the MSI.
The funny thing is, I actually think that last point you make is the first thing I'll bring up, which is I just want to clarify something with Keire. Right, here's the problem with the topic. Are you yourself building in that they have to win Worlds for this take to apply, or does it apply now?
No. They have to have like a good. They have to have a good World.
Do they have to win it though? Can they make like finals?
No. They can have like a great, but it has to be like a good finals. Like that LCK finals. If it was a good finals, I would be maybe better. Right. Like I'd be more big. It wasn't like a good finals for either team, to be honest. As in like Worlds, they've got to go in and they can lose in like great fashion. I can like understand if HLA or BLG or TES beat them in a great BO5. There's no shame in like in losing, but you can't have like low quality games. I'm more considering on like game quality than I am actually on the game like results.
Because if it's that they have to, like, here's the thing. To actually be the best of all time, I think Zaboutine makes a very good point there, which is, I do feel like, not intentionally, but I think we're all doing this who are analysts, is because we all decided that obviously EWC, because it's not an official part of the Riot circuit, doesn't count towards the Grand Slam or the Golden Slam or whatever you want to call that. Just because it doesn't count to that doesn't mean it doesn't count to how good you are as a team, though. Like, you did lose. I agree with Zaboutine. You did lose. Yeah. Look, it wasn't the best of 5, but even so, it wasn't a convincing game. It was actually kind of whack, wasn't it? Like, the way they lost was actually, it was probably the worst series they played all year. I think that's actually pretty easy to say. So that still does count against you, whereas obviously in past years, like, there actually wasn't a tournament like that often for SKT. All the difference is they had those like Mickey Mouse Western IEMs where like it was them playing like, fucking some like European team, and so they didn't even have to be the best Korean team. They would have walked that anyway. If people don't know, even fucking people like bloody like Chaogu Reapers used to be able to win those bloody lands back then. So that isn't the same as EWC, but I'll just say that I do think all the games you play count for this. Essentially, I sort of agree and I don't agree. Like, put it this way, I more meant when I said as opener, obviously right now I wouldn't say they're the best team and stake my claim to it, etc. I do still think it's possible they could be. Also, the T1 angle is a very fair one, as you say, because the part people always miss about T1, it's why, sadly, the most underrated team of all time probably is the core of the Tigers. Because, bro, people forget that, like, are you ready for a statement that if you understand League back then will make you realise how unfair the characterisation of the T1 Rocks Tigers rivalry is? When they played with those two cores, Rocks Tigers was the better regular season team almost every single split, guys. Like something like 3 or 4 splits out of 4. Like, it was crazy. Like, but the point is, T1 had the clutch factor. T1 would beat them head to head. Like, that's why famously it was only KT beating SKT that allowed Rocks Tigers to finally win. And then they even almost fucked it up in 5 games, you remember, for themselves against KT. Even though I agree that was a whack-ass KT roster one. So I'm sort of with you on that angle. I think that's actually a very fair one. Essentially, when people say it, that those T1 teams are the best teams of all time, it's like, essentially, they were only the best teams in the really big games. Now, true, a lot of modern fans do think like the most important game is all that matters. I don't think so. I think the most important game is the most important one, but then the other games count too. Like, I do think for greatest of all time, the reason why I can still say I think it's JDG is because what I mean is if you were to watch all their games or you were to pick a random game, theirs would be the highest level in my opinion. Like, the way they played looked like the most impressive. But I also agree on that point. To be fair, the difference was they had that like G2 2019 factor where they were doing amazing comebacks and winning with team fight. GenG is true, except for the few times, and let's be real, it's like you can count on one hand how many times they've lost. When they don't lose, they are so incredibly dominant. In fact, I actually think, here's the like mild hot take to agree with your take, Keire. The reason why, even if they do win Worlds, I don't think this will ever be called the best team of all time, is because they're actually too good at the less flashy things about League. And I think, unfortunately, it will make people think they're boring, or even worse, you'll just think this is the worst thing about GenG. They actually might, stylistically, realistically be the best team ever because the way they make the other guy look shit makes it look like, oh, you just win because there's no good teams you're playing. That actually reminds me of like some of the people in UFC that are like that. Like you think of some of the amazing wrestlers because they just hold you down and you're never having like an amazing back and forth fight with them. Someone's going to think, oh, you just never fought anyone good. So in a way, I sort of agree. Like it's, by the way, pretty sweet. It's certainly plausible they could still be the best team of all time. I think that's a legit one. Then I'd lastly just say, I do think people also have like ignored that they have barely lost any games. Remember, they lost that LCK final by 1 game. It's not like they got 3-0 or something like that. That was absolutely winnable. Then you consider in the regular season of summer, they only lost 1 time as well. And then over the whole year, because EWC was best of 3, they've only lost 1 best of 5, and it was by 1 game. Like, that's still pretty impressive. If you want to look at like greatest team of all time, you'd look how many best of 5s did he play? How many? As you say, obviously they murked everyone at MSI. They didn't lose a single series. So no, I think it's a legit point. I wouldn't necessarily go with it now. That's why you haven't either. You've technically made it conditional for Worlds. I'll probably go one further though. The difference is like if they don't win Worlds, I could do a JDG and give like a stylistic reason they're number 1. But I think if you actually want people to ever accept it as more than a hot take, they probably have to win Worlds. If they win Worlds, I think that convo probably becomes more legit. You know. Right, do you have a take now, Zaboutine? Do you have one we're going to move to?
I have a pretty tame one to start with.
Okay.
I'm going to say that 100 Thieves won't be in group stage.
As in they won't make it through planes?
Yeah, they're not making it through planes.
Is that it? Wait a minute. Here's what's mad. This is where, Zaboutine, I feel like you live in a bubble of other experts and analysts because fans are going to go mental over that tip, bro. Like to a fan, I think they think that's spicy. So here's the question. Obviously, in planes, like no one knows the other teams is the problem if you're a Western fan. So since in their group, they play R7 into the qualifier, right? Rainbow 7 is the team, if people don't know, though, that has Summit, the old like sick Korean top laner, right? Are you implying that they're going to lose to R7?
No, I think they're going to win against R7. I think they're going to lose in the qualification match against the Marines. And there is the shuffle. So if you lose in your own bracket, you get thrown in the loser bracket.
Yeah, so they play
from the other bracket. And the problem is in the other bracket, right? The loser is going to be Pain. I don't think Pain is any good, right? The Brazil historically has been improving slightly, but I don't think they are yet to beat an LCS team.
Yeah.
But then you look at the 3 other teams, right, from the other bracket, and you have MDK, right, which I know that there is this type of excitement for 100 Thieves because they had such a good run as an underdog and they beat C9, right? I think that C9 was very dysfunctional as a team. And if you actually look at the gameplay in the LCS games, I think it's kind of a mess, the same way like European medium level is. But I would say individually, I think Europeans play slightly better. I think any Vietnamese team is very dangerous. Like you should never underestimate Vietnamese teams. So obviously Marines are like usually the best, but the VKE are very, very good as well. And PSG is definitely for me the favorite of this side of the bracket. It's not even MDK in my book. So I assume that PSG is going to win. PNG is going to do like 0-2 or something like this and go in the loser. And so 100 Thieves is going to have to beat MDK and VKE to make it to groups. I'm not even sure MDK is going to make it, but I'm pretty sure, I'm quite confident that it's going to be very hard for 100 Thieves to make it out of groups. If it works the same way and it's the same like shuffle after you lose in your bracket, you get thrown in the other bracket, I'm pretty sure they don't make it.
Is this mainly like an anti-100 Thieves take? Like you just don't think they're good? Is there something special about one of these teams that like people are not aware of?
I think that there is something that I've seen. Do you remember the year TSM had like this crazy run in playoff and they made it and then they did 0-6? And I was watching the game,
2020. Yeah.
Right. And I was watching the games and I was like, the opposing teams are not doing the things they usually do and they have this like great run. And I had no expectation for them. When they actually hit 0-6, I was like, well deserved because that's the level they've shown the whole year. Because they just played bad the whole year and they just made like a heroic run. Beating C9 and being a good team in playoffs in the LCS, I think is not enough to show that you're a good team in average. I think their ceiling has been higher than what people expected and they played at their ceiling. But I think their floor is still very low. And I don't think that you can repeat the ceiling. And especially with the changes of the meta, the way the teams are going to have to play the game is drastically different. With the comeback of Ahri, control mages, the fact that a lot of like fast-paced junglers are coming back, farming junglers are way worse. Brand, Zyra, Lilia are going to be off the table. They're going to be way more emphasis on like pushing mid and moving around the map with like Ahri and Jarvans, Ahri and Xinjiao, all these kind of things. I heavily doubt that a team like 100 Thieves has what it takes to beat teams that are way more organized around that. And especially, for instance, team like MDK, I think that playing around the jungle aggressively is something they do very well. So I have very low hopes for them to actually make it out.
Here's the thing. I actually think that's a mad spicy take. So come and hit me with it, Keire. What do you think?
No, initially I thought Zaboutine's lost the plot, but now all of a sudden I'm changing my.
No, he's won you over. Okay.
I'm actually near changing pick'ems. Like 100 Thieves are in the bin. It's a complete revolution. It didn't take long because I was just sitting there and I had completely forgotten about the switch over. So like I'm like, yeah, like that makes entire sense to me because it isn't actually really predicated purely on the fact of you know, I've seen Gam do things. I've seen Gam beat TES. I've seen Gam beat Fnatic. I've seen Gam beat TL. Right, and I've seen Western teams in particular, TL included, any teams, right? Because they blew up in play-ins last year. I think they got 3-0 or 2-0, whatever it was. Gam really are a team historically as an organisation and some of their players that really play not to their level but play without like regard. They will like play not like that scared. They're really aggressive, and that can be something that NA teams really can hate at times, where they will hand you lots and lots of situations where you need to like be like checked. So I actually think, you know, 100 Thieves losing to Gam is entirely on the cards, particularly in a BO3, where I don't actually think it best suits them. And then when you go down to the next qualification match, you're getting the best of PSG or Mad Lions, and I don't favour them against either of those people, because they can't escape either of them. And I don't think they're better than Mad, and I don't think they're better than PSG. I think their best matchups against Mad, but like, take people like, you know, Sniper in the top lane. I don't think they will enjoy playing against Merwin. It's like, Merwin is filled with flaws and deficiencies, but he has like a somewhat Adam effect, where if you've not played against him, if you think you're better, can end up losing to a player who's a lot worse. And that happened to all the EU tops all year, eventually in playoffs. Plus, the Mad Lions is going to get a lot of prep going into this, and they were able to beat G2 with all the prep. So, you know, there's a lot of upside, I actually think here. And initially, I was like, the Frenchman's lost his mind, but he's won me over.
Well, in that case, I'm going to take the appropriate moment then to be the person who thinks he's lost his mind. Because here's the problem with that, is you do notice for that result to happen, I have to sort of grant you about 2 or 3 other results to happen first to make the nightmare matchup, right? Well, here's the obvious problem I see in their bracket is like all of that sounds great until like SoftBank Hawks just beat Gam and then 100 Thieves just beat SoftBank Hawks or something, and then it doesn't even matter, and they qualify anyway. It's like none of that ever comes into effect. So, one, I do need all these other results to happen first. Listen, I don't hate the angles for some of the wildcard teams, though. Like, I will agree. Like, if people don't know, Gam still has Levi, that jungler that did all the shit he's talking about with all the past lineups. Actually, and also, I do think for similar reasons, PSG is always going to be underrated. Guys, they literally have not only Maple still, who was like the fucking Bjergsen of their region or whatever, or maybe it should be Jensen, should be the better example, because Maple's actually good internationally. That's right. Even in 2024, still shooting strays at Bjergsen when he's not even playing. That's nothing to do with the show. But the other factor is they also have that guy, if people don't remember, Jungia, the jungler. He was actually good when he used to play in the LPL, mate. He was actually a good player. He had skills. So I actually think that's not even a bad set of players. Like, pretty experienced too. So some of these teams definitely have upset potential. Like, I think here's the funny thing. I don't agree with it, but that's why I actually think it's a pretty good hot take. I actually think it's actually a way spicier hot take than you realise. Because you're being too reasonable. You're forgetting that most fans, I mean, half the people who probably writing in the comments section right now have never seen any of these teams play, but they're still telling you that it's wrong and there's no way, 100 Thieves can lose. And also, I think part of them, the biggest mistake of all is, I think a lot of people just see the name 100 Thieves and think, because remember, the last few years, they've been established in your brain as they're always a top org because of the old lineup with Hui and fucking Abadagi and all those guys and Someday, etc. So I think people are forgetting. I'll just run it down now to just finally make the point. Remember, we're talking about 100 Thieves with Sniper, a pure rookie, by the way, who could absolutely just blow up in his own face. River, who is very good in NA, but I've always thought was like mildly fraudulent aside from that because they try to make him sound like the Korean inspired, like he's a mastermind. It's like, I see that in LCS only, and that is like the little kids table. Quid, the mid laner, is a bit up and down, and is obviously still very inexperienced, but who the fuck knows how he's going to do at Worlds. And then the bot lane, I'm sorry, I think that bot lane is a war crime. The Tomo guy is not a good player. And the Ayla guy, I've made this point before, this guy must just know where the bodies are buried. How does he keep getting checks? How does he keep getting checks? It is fucking...
Any one.
So I don't get it, mate. I don't get the whole team. So I do think their team is actually mad crap. Like, for this way, for me, them beating Cloud9 was absolutely like an indictment of Cloud9. It wasn't like, wow, 100 Thieves is actually pretty good. Oh my God, and they figured out some stuff. No, that was like all negatives to Cloud9, essentially, you know. So, yeah, I'll say it. I think it's not a bad hot take, actually. I think it's spicier than you realise. I think it's up there. But if you want spicy, though, Zaboutine, if you want the Schofield meter to go right up, and by the way, what's great is it's just a joke for you, Keire. Schofield meter already sounded weird before, but Schofield in the UK now, I don't think anyone wants Schofield attached to them at this point in time. That's far too spicy a meatball there, Keire, in that scenario. But enough about that. So what I'm going to say is this. I actually just wrote a list out of junglers that are attending this tournament, right? You have some pretty good big names, so listen to the list, guys. You have Peanut from Hanwha Life, of course. You have Canyon, like obviously Peanut, by the way, many-time LCK champion. Canyon himself obviously is a world champion. You have Tarzan, who was obviously a top player in the LPL. You have Wei, who obviously came and took that gig from Jun in BLG. That's the top team right now. You have Tian, multiple-time MVP, worlds winner. You have Razork, who's like, by the way, he's probably just one of the best European players ever. My jungler, he's just mega right now. You have Oner, reigning world champion. You have Wei. That's right. The Chinese are literally sending people with the same name, just repeated twice. Not to be confused with Wei. We're talking about Wei here. Now, he's not as good. Some would say he's the inferior Wei, but whatever. He is another Wei. And then you've also got Yike, many-time champion of the LEC. So I've just listed off like a solid list of, what was that? 9 different names there. And I'm just going to put this hot take on the table here. And actually, I might even just let it sit for a second. This hot pie has all the steam on the windowsill. Are you ready? I think of that list of like 9 names I just listed. Right of this moment. So we're not talking history or what will happen. Just right as of this moment. I'm not joking. I actually think on that list that Inspired is the 5th best jungler at Worlds. So here's my list. Are you ready? Peanut obviously is ahead of him. I'll put Canyon ahead of him. There's 2. I'll say Tarzan's ahead of him because I just think stylistically, I think Tarzan's like a better version of Inspired. I'll say Razork because I think his hands are insane. And I'll say, you know what? This is why I'm going to hurt people's feelings. I'm actually going to take Tian. I think his path is very good. I'm saying, actually, I don't think Oner's in that good form at the moment. I think the 2 Ways can fuck off and find their own way out of this convo. They're not even the best in the LPL, guys. Actually, that's one of the things I'll give props to those 2 teams. They actually have used those junglers to just supplement the team. They're not great junglers in themselves. The joke is Jun, who sat at home watching Worlds, going, can I get in on this? He's better than all of them probably, but he just can't play that team. So they're not on. Yike, I actually think's just hasn't fit the meta very well recently. He's kind of been a bit out of sorts. And then who was the other one? No, that's it. I actually think I'm going to say, look, the problem here, I'll just put one caveat in, is I'm not Whippo. I am aware Inspired just won a fucking Mickey Mouse competition and that he didn't just like out-jungle the fucking best players in the world. Spoiler, he out-jungled like Umpty and River. Like, that's not crazy to me. So I'm not Whippo. I'm not the guy who goes like, oh my God, there's like me, Impact, and 6 bots. And I'm like, well, the best in the city. Like, I'm not an idiot. So I know it's not that he's done anything crazy in terms of who he's beaten, but I just think if you watch the eye test on Inspired, I think he has one of the most consistent players I have ever seen from jungle. Crucially, I've also now A/B tested him with all different solo laners and players. He clearly does make all the decisions, in my opinion, in the game. I think he has one of the best like control styles of jungle I've ever seen from the West. In my opinion, most Western junglers, if you want them to be good, actually usually have to be like Razork. They just have to have hands and go crazy and basically have like high activity. What I love about Inspired, it's why I think, if you notice, LS has always been fucking 24/7 on this guy's dick, basically, is because he actually does play like almost Korean style of jungle. I actually think it's really impressive. So, listen, this is a hot take. Obviously, he hasn't played any of the competition. Like, some of the people I just dissed, like, weird. They're, like, actually beating, like, top teams in BO5s and going, like, deep in the LPL. So I understand it is a hot take. But there we go. I'll put that on the table there. Insane EU Homer take. What do you think? What do you think?
Well,
I just put him over Oner, the reigning world champion. Get out for your Oner. Get out.
Because here's the thing. Before this show even came along, I said it. I was like, at the point going into MSI, I was like, I said it because I thought it was self-evident. I was like, Yike's better than Oner. But I thought that was just like obvious to anyone that watched the game. Little did I know that there was churches being built to Oner at the time, and people were trying to end the game by building Oner Wonders, Age of Empires style. But no, we'll not even get into that. Then obviously Yike had not so good MSI and tailed off, and Oner rose up like the fucking second.
Oh, his EWC was sick, yeah.
Yeah. However, let me just say as a caveat, I am actually so against fucking Asian players just being better than Western players, particularly at jungle.
I mean, jungle's obviously the hardest one because if you have all the super carries, it's hard to know who is better in it. That's also why I picked this angle. So go on, hit me with it. I too would like
to jungle for Knight, Chove, and Zeka, and the likes of this. I bet it's a right treat when your jungler your mid laner has never lost lane, checks notes ever in the history of the fucking league. So, but to be fair, those guys are more deserving. The only thing I would say is, and it's only because I actually think he Inspired and Yike are basically like the same player. Well, years ago they were very much like the same, a very similar player. It's really weird because Inspired now plays way more tanks, and he plays way more for like his lanes than he ever did in.
Oh, he's an all-round jungler now for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But what do you call it he's got the nice breadth as well, where he can play the Maokai Amumu, he plays the Ivern as well, he can flex into the Lilia, and I think Yike's got like a lot of the strengths, and basically most people discredit Yike because Yike's on like G2, so they're not actually aware.
Yeah, of course.
They're not sure how much he actually does.
Sure.
But I was talking to Rich about this because Rich thinks he's like overrated, which is fine if you think he's like overrated, and I think he's a good player, he might be overrated. If you actually go just look, like Yike had like a huge amount of like carry games like going into this stuff. So I would have like Yike, Razork, and Inspired like all going in about the same. But I think I'm agreeing with you, Thorin. I actually think they're better than a lot of the Asian junglers that are like coming in. I think nobody was talking about Wei for a reason, and he's good at fixing what BLG needed. Wei, don't even get me started. Like, he needs Poppy and Trundle to exist for him to be like a top tier player. He's great mechanically, but he's playing a brain role. So yeah, like I'm actually like well down on this. Like unless you're literally one of the god tier, like elite, like Korean junglers playing on one of the elite teams, I think like a bunch of the Western junglers could go like par for par, punch for punch. I even think Tian has like systemic issues in terms of like Tian has like he has choking problems. I don't fucking give a fuck. He has like straight up like choking problems where he will like struggle to execute if he's given like the agency in game 5 and game 4 like picks where it's like do or die. I also think one of the things that I've not really seen about Tian is if he does not actually have some of like the best laners, like what is his like response to like certain situations that would happen to him. I think that would be really interesting because if you've looked at the later end of Tian's career, it has been predicated on absolutely unbelievable laners, Knight, Cream, Jaculov, Mako, 369, etc. So I would maybe even put Tian in the same like grouping on them or a bit below, but I think Tian is like great. It's just his extremities of like what can happen to him in the pressure situations can sometimes be frustrating.
Come on.
Okay, so it's my turn, and obviously because
I can already tell you're going to throw the bucket of cold water in my face. Come on, do it.
I have to say that you guys are madmen. I don't think it's like. I think it's a pretty good take, to be frank. I think there is just one point that I'm not sure about is. You know, the evaluation of Inspired is heavily correlated to the importance of jungle within the meta. Okay. If you take kind of a look back at like the last few years, I think that he's a player that plays well when the resource is low, when the jungle is low resources, but his impact is still way more narrow than some other jungles. I think, for instance, the only one Western jungle that doesn't seem to be like his meta proof is Razork. I will agree with you on that, Thorin. I think that Razork can really play any style. But I don't think that, for instance, Inspired, although he can play tanks, I think on early aggressive jungles, he's not comfortable sacking camps and making an action that can put him behind. Because he's a player that makes a lot of very good decisions when he's on pace with the game, when he doesn't feel behind. Forcing a play when he feels weaker is something that's very out of comfort for him. And that's probably the only like path of improvement he has as a player. So obviously, if you look at this year has been an extraordinary year for junglers, especially the summer split. Why? For two reasons. The first one is jungle is just very resource rich, and the second thing, there has been a multiple of AD champions in mid that allows AP junglers that are the fastest at farming in the game, especially with legendaries and stuff like this. So it opens the path for clearing your 6 camps while being on par with the pace of the game and allowing where you want to invest your resources in. This falls perfectly in the playstyle of Inspired, and for this reason, as a surprise, when the meta comes back with like resource-intense jungler, he looks the best, and he has been outperforming, I think, a lot of his previous performances when the meta was not that way. On the other hand, I agree with you that a lot of like Asian junglers are overrated. Because they play with the best players, and if you really look at the raw decision they make, there is nothing extraordinary, even if you compare them at like middle of the pack junglers from the West. I would say for the case of Oner, because I think the person who draws the line is Oner.
Okay.
I would say that I've seen T1 before and after Oner. I think he has really been the cement of this roster over the years, even though it doesn't look like he's the person who carries the games. His consistency has been really, really showing. A little less, I think, this year. He has been a little worse.
Okay.
And as of now, you were mentioning, but I think that it's very hard for T1 to do exactly what the meta was requiring, which is transfer the resources to the jungle and play with the jungle. I think this is something that they're not comfortable with, because for the last 2 years, when they started building this team late 2022, just before Worlds, when they made finals, Oner takes the short end of the stick, because Keire plays very aggressively, plays champions that usually require a little bit of resources, so he has to take this short end. And suddenly the whole paradigm of T1 play has been to funnel resources to the jungler, which they are not comfortable with, and we've seen them play worse. But I don't think that Oner cannot do it. For the fact, I'm going to double down on a very, very hot take that I say to my friends off. But I'm going to say, I think that if Oner played any lane in Europe right now in the LEC, any lane, I would say he's in the top 3. As just a league player. If he was role swapping and playing just the game and spamming any other role, I think he would end up in the top 3 of any role.
Like he could be like a top 3 EU mid laner, basically, if he was in LEC.
Yeah,
right.
I think so. I think he would just be behind Humanoid if he was role swapping. I think this guy is extraordinarily good at the game.
Well, like his Zaboutine accidentally makes all his hot takes. It's just like he trips over and a hot take falls out. Oh, sorry, is that mine? Let me get like, okay. That's more hot take than mine. Okay. By the way, guy editing the video, make that hot take like Oner would be a top 3 laner in Europe or something. Like, that's the headline of the video right there. There you go, keep going.
Okay, so for the thing, I think he's 5th, he's 6th, because I would put Oner before him. And then if you guys want to react to that, I think that Oner would be a top 3 any position in Europe.
Any position? Not even just mid lane. Like, he could play ADC as well. Okay, like, all right.
Yeah, of course, any position. If he just stops and start grinding the ladder on any position and comes to Europe, I would say he can be top 3 in this position.
Do you know what, Keire? All I'm going to say is now I actually feel a little less confident about my take on Bo, that Bo could still be great, because Zaboutine always backed me up on that one, but now he just thinks Oner can just like play every role. Like, I'm scared now. I feel like I'm lost. My bearings are gone.
I'm absolutely astounded to go.
It's a good hot take, though. I've got to say it's a pretty good.
Okay. So first of all, I actually do agree that Oner in summer this year was amazing. T1 should have been building monuments to Oner in summer, because he was carrying fuck ups. Like, Zeus's laning went to shit. He couldn't find lane matchups. Faker's laning went to shit. Couldn't find lane matchups. The only good laner left was basically Guma. And if that's the case in T1, well, fucking hell, have I got news for you. And basically Oner was having to sacrifice so much. If he was on like these high resource demanding champs, he was having to sacrifice camps to go and fix lane states or allow for backtimers. I do 100% agree with that. He did drop off from me going into playoffs. And as his like lanes, basically his laners like fixed their game states, his like reaction to these things didn't improve, and he wasn't more selfish. He kind of stayed in that like middle ground. The one thing I would say is your criticisms of Inspired would then also not just be equal as like levelable at like Tarzan. In terms of like Tarzan shown like no adequacy on like the early game champions, like it couldn't win on like Poppy, couldn't win. I understand that you can just think Tarzan's a better player than Inspired. I don't think that's like a hot take, but like when you level criticism and Inspired in terms of like the early game agency like champions, a lot of the best junglers right now, and who we consider the best outside of Peanut and Razork, all struggle with that. Canyon struggled with that in the past. Tarzan struggled with that in the past. Jun has struggled with that in the past. It's literally the reason he's not on BLG. So like most teams have like adapted or counter-adapted to like the meta more than like anything else. I think who's good at jungle right now more reflects why one of the reasons Kanavi just couldn't get the team over the line like domestically, more than anything else. And Milky Way, part of like Milky Way's like fade away. Like, you know what I mean? These types of things were like quite natural if you looked at like the progression of the meta. In hindsight, obviously, you know. Now, Oner being a top 3 laner in Europe based on anything. Have you got Oner POVs hiding away there, Zaboutine? I was like, or have you got like Oner's like stream where you've been playing like other roles? Cause I can't remember what Oner's other role is when he plays on like solo queue, right? But that's bold as brass, bro. Like that is.
I'm very confident with my take, by the way, because I think the top 3, I think the top 2 in Europe is very strong, but I think past the top 2 in any position, I think it's, I mean, you see guys coming from the era with no experience and really slot themselves like the top 3, 4, 5. It's not like you tell me like Oner cannot play like top ERL level.
But I'm telling you, see, okay, ADC, if he has the hands for ADC, he can do it because he's the most plug and play role. He can't. I'm telling you right now, support's a no, and maybe mid lane's a no for me in Europe because he can't speak English. If you remove the fact that he can't speak English, I would.
Obviously, I put that aside. I'm playing just gameplay wise, obviously, because the would be way too much, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's just gameplay wise, like
yeah.
You see him play Viego, right? He's Viego. He picks Viego, presses R. Plays the best first champion, presses R. Plays the best second champion, presses R. Does one crazy up play, then presses, and you're like, how do you
actually
do
just
that?
realised that, by the way, that's even actually a pretty based angle, Keire, because what he's just used there is the fact that by playing Viego, sometimes you do play the champions that would be in the other roles, and he does a really good job mechanically. That's actually a pretty smart angle. That's a good one. I've got to give you on that one. I'm with Keire though. I agree. The only way the way you made it like an impossibly hot take is you were like every role. Like I'll give you like if you think of the positions, like for example, I also think top lane's quite weak, bro. Once you get past the absolute best top laners, I mean, we are talking about people like Merwin just came out of the RLs and they're doing fine. Like they're not having any problems at all. By the way, Adam's chain feeding and he's been in the league for years. Maybe top lane you could do it. ADC, look, I actually give it to all his mechanics are fucking bonkers. I don't know. I'm with Keire though. The mid lane one's a reach though. That's the reach. Come on.
So who's the third best mid laner in Europe?
Ooh.
Like, what do you mean?
It's not.
It's not right now.
Is it Nuck? Like you think Oner cannot play lane as good as Nuck does? You really think so?
With his hands, he could be better. I don't know if he would have as good decision making. That's the problem.
Decision making, and plus like that, you've also got like the tilt of like Oner can tilt, by the way, and like laner tilt is different to like jungle tilt. Okay. So you need to like see how he adapts into it. Like in terms of skills, Zaboutine, I shake hands on you, but like I've seen it like too much. I've seen people in tier 2 of LDL and LCK have the best mechanics you've ever seen in your entire life, and I've got POVs, like, and then they like Aki. If you've seen Aki POVs, it's like this guy was sent from heaven to play Lee Sin, right? And then when he actually plays the LPL, he's a fraction of the player that he actually is. Right. But like, because it can only go so far. Like hands in League of Legends can only, if you hit the Lee Sin queue, half the battle is not fucking taking it in. You know, like.
Sure. Yes.
So.
By the way, that unironically, two things there. One, the reason why also all if you're not the same with the Inspired one, all jungle discussions are good, in my opinion, because I also do think, as we've alluded to when evaluating players, it is in my opinion, the harshest meta swap role in the whole game of League of Legends. Like, I used to be a big Flame fan. Every top lane fan of carries used to complain when tanks come. And I always used to have to tell people, look, we can complain compared to other carry roles like mid and ADC, but at the end of the day, there was never really a meta where it was only tanks. There was always a bruiser or two there. There was always a Renekton on your fuck. You could always still actually be the carry player. And even if you weren't, by the way, you could also just do what people like the Shy did and just be better than everyone else on a carry. You could still sort of force it. I actually do think that the junglers, a lot of junglers on the vein of this conversation, have been overrated when they had like one of the styles, like they could only play the S1E3 type style, but they just had like the best possible mid lane, like synergy with like their mid laner or top lane. You know, like, I do think there's a lot of boosted people. So that's why I think always jungle is the best one. If you want a Westerner to be better than the Asians, it's why back in the day we all do think Diamond Prox was the best. Didn't matter that the Koreans were already better. Like he just was the genius at what he did. And then I also do think that like The Oner one's not bad. I just think, look, it's a hot take. It's not supposed to be one we all agree with necessarily. Right, speaking of hot takes, I've actually got one now that I feel like on the surface, nobody will agree with. Because I saw this was very poorly received across the board. So I'm going to have to put a caveat here. You might have seen, just literally within the last day or so, Riot released their own global power rankings, right? Now, there's two things here. One, it is a power ranking. There's that to add in. I will say the problem with power rankings as someone who works in media is almost it's like hot takes. They watch the show, they hear it's hot takes, we mention it's hot takes, we contextually frame it as a hot take, and they react like it's not a hot take, and we've said it's definitely true, it's 100% a fact, and it's going to happen. So the same thing happens with power rankings, which is everyone in the world looks at a power ranking and they don't think, now wait a minute, remember a power ranking's a ranking of your power, like your recent performance, and they go, this is a hard ranking of the best teams in the world. Everyone does that. And then you want to know the really sad black pill if you're in media is that's the feature, not the bug of power rankings. The reason you put, back in the day when people were like, why does LOL esports post the rankings when everyone hates them? Because they get infinite engagement. That's why you do it. And by the way, it's very smart if you're like a Dom or a Keire. You should always do a power ranking for every event, bro. Because you actually want... Here's the biggest joke of all. Even if you had a power ranking of the top 10 teams and they agreed with you on 8 of the positions, the comment would only be on the 2 positions they don't agree with. It will always just be that you're wrong. Here's a nitpick and here's why you're wrong and why you're biased, right? So one, power rankings in general are always misunderstood. And by the way, are always primed to have everyone disagree. Because actually, that thing I just suggested there of like a mild disagreement, like, hey, you have him 7 when he should be 8. People don't say, hey, you have him 7 when he should be 8. They go, oh my God! You think that team's better? You know nothing about this game. And then, like, you actually look at their reasons, and it's like the most, like, it's fucking, like, debatable. It's like you're picking 1A and 1B. So I say all that to say this. At the moment, all they've done is introduce the power rankings. And at the moment, if you don't know, it's even like an ELO system based on something like the last 3 years. So what they do is they use the last 3 years to evaluate, like, region strength or something. And then within your region, ELO system, so if you don't know, that means literally who you're beating and losing against, is changing where you are, like, within the grouping of your ranking. Now, the reason why, you're going to think, how is he possibly going to get from where he's talking about now to this being good? That this power ranking is a net good for League of Legends, Keire. Here's why. There's one small caveat. If they just leave it like this and it's just a ranking for like fun or, just like see how the system works. Because if you notice, it's obviously like some sort of cynical partnership that they need to promote Amazon, whatever that thing's called, with like the fucking services or whatever. So some people think it's just a way to get another Amazon deliverable. Here's where it will become good, and this is going to blow your minds even more. It actually will become a total net good, no matter how they implement it, if they start using it as the seeding for all the international tournaments. Now that already is going to make people like, Thorin, what are you talking about? I just told you. I disagree with that. No, here's why. Because there's a point I have always made about seeding that I feel like is a very missed one. Because if you don't know, as well as studying esports history, I've sort of put a lot of time over the years. I even ran a tournament in Counter-Strike called Flashpoint. I've put a lot of time into thinking how formats work. What's the difference between double elim and single elim? It's why, by the way, I don't say one's necessarily always better. It depends on how you set it up, for example. You can make an amazing single elim tournament. Just single elim tournaments is why Worlds is very key. Have to be seeded extremely well. Because the point of a double elim tournament is the lower bracket, just because it's a second chance to play other teams, can sort of auto-correct your mistakes with seeding, essentially. It doesn't really matter if number 1 and number 2 meet in the quarters. If in the lower bracket, number 1 goes to the final and the other one meets in there, you still get to the final anyway. So you can see how it sort of works. Now, the key reason why I say that is, by the way, this is why it's a good hot take. Even I, if they implement this system, I'm not going to agree with loads of the rankings. Even I would meld and see a time, well, I'll give you a random one. Let's say they'd ranked like T1 above like top esports. I would lose my shit. I'd be like, on what basis? What, just because of EWC? Like, what the fuck? Like, top esports look way better in summer. LPL's harder. I don't blame them for not making fat. Right? But here's why it would be a net good. And like overall, nothing negative about the individual things could, because what people always miss is this. You know, the reason why we couldn't have seeding for Worlds is people always said, because you don't play each other enough, you can't go off the matches. It would be opinion, wouldn't it be biased, right? Here's what they don't seem to understand though. They already have seeding at Worlds. It's arbitrary. What we do is we pretend it's impossible to know who's better. So what we did for all those Worlds without Swiss system, guys, for real, this is literally real, we used to pretend that the top seed from LCS could just be as good as the top seed from the LCK. We used to pretend that every single year. And what that meant was when we then seeded groups, or in this case a bracket, that meant it was possible that the top seed from Korea could play like a really good team, and the top seed from LCS could play a really bad team, even though that's terrible seeding. If you think about like objective seeding and what would experts say, well, here's the point. With this system, that could never, ever happen. With this system, you could never, ever have the winners. So currently, FlyQuest in the Champions LCS, FlyQuest could never be number one seed. By the way, in a positive sense, like obviously if secretly the region became amazing and they did well, it would eventually impact this, guys. Eventually the LCS teams would get good over a 3-year span, go to international performances, get deep players, and it would fix itself. So my point is, at the moment, the old systems we have before we implement this are filled with massive loopholes like that, where if that's at the top level, by the way, we then do the same thing at the bottom level. Remember what we did with every playing team? We act like, and remember guys, in 2022, DRX and RNG were playing teams. RNG, champions of MSI, and DRX, who went on to win Worlds, were playing teams. Well, once you get out of that plane, we also act like all playing seeds are identical. And we go, hey, I've got you a playing seed main event team. Yours is DRX, who's about to win Worlds. Yours is RNG, who just won MSI. And yours is Loud Gaming. Welcome. Like, that's what we were also doing at the bottom end of the ranking. So I actually think the current seeding system of no seeding, which is seeding, it's choosing not to make a deterministic choice to evaluate and show there's differences. Even though I understand why they did it, this might sound like a weird quick side point, but the reason why people like no seeding is they naively feel like nobody was biased. But actually what you're doing is you're allowing a randomized element. Like I say, bias is better than random. Because random, if you think about it, contains every possible permutation. So in a random system, by the way, you could get lucky and you could have the best seeding ever. You could also, by definition, have the worst seeding ever. Now, they didn't have purely random, but I've just showed you how we have groups that were randomized within it. So we pretended... By the way, it's not just an NA thing either. Except for the year G2 was the best. Any year where the LEC team gets the harder group, the easy group, instead of the LPL team would be unfair because the LPL was better than the LEC. So... I purposely did it because I know people are going to hate power rankings. They hate the idea you could seed anything. They're obviously always going to find, all three of us could open this thing now and find 10 different placings we disagree with, or what the hell, what's going on here? But I think as a net overall, I actually think it'll be a positive. Essentially, it's a secret way to say I think they should be seeding at Worlds. Thoughts?
I think I actually kind of agree with you. I think that having a semi-objective measurement of performance is still better than no seeding at all. And I think there is no experts, right, or group of experts alive that can define, a consensus within the space. Like, even if you gathered, the people that are the most revered publicly, right? I don't know who they are.
Oh, yeah, but actually, you just reminded me of something.
You
just reminded me of something for Zaboutine. That's why, though, I agree with you. Nobody could define the overall. But here's the key thing. The things they would agree on, Zaboutine, we all agree on. That's the point I didn't make. Because what's funny is, what made me realise this is actually HLTV and Counter-Strike. People will know I've been at odds with a lot of the people who run HLTV, the main stats website in Counter-Strike. But one thing I've always agreed on is, I would much rather have them be allowed to seed with their ranking the major than have a randomized major seeding. Because the difference is, like you're saying now, maybe me and them wouldn't agree on the exact top 7, but the difference is they would never have my number 1 team 10th. And I would never have their number 1 team 9th, if you know. We would always have them 1 or 2 apart. I think that is the key point I'm essentially making. Is we'd all be close enough together to make it pretty good overall. None of us would do none of us would ever, as an expert, have Rainbow 7 number 1 for Worlds, would we? Now, you can't currently have that in this system, but they are treated as though they're equivalent to Mad Lions, for example,
Now that makes sense. The only problem of these are they're very snowbally, right? Because the more you win, the more your region wins, the better seeded you are, the easier your matches are. So you have higher chance of winning the next one. That's a big problem in the FGC, for instance. You have some players that always end up versus the same opponent because of seeding. Okay. And this is the very specific matchup they cannot beat. And so they always end up 7th. And the time, this guy is not there, they can go second or first. And then because they've been second, they can beat their seeding and finally access to the next one. Because sometimes you have one opponent you can't beat. The only problem I have with that might be the issue with the kind of recursive over the course of 3 years, where you've seen, for instance, Korea would have had the best seeds 1, 2, 3, 4, in 2013 to 2016. But then they went on a slump. So, for instance, 2018 to 2020, that one would have been seeded terribly in 2020. Like all Chinese teams would have been rated way higher through this system. 1, 2, 3, 4 would have been China.
Right.
So this is my only inconvenience is if we have
fair.
this combined with Swiss, and we take an average of 3 years. I think it's too much because this is a very high variance industry. It's not like soccer or I don't know, like American football where you change 1 or 2 players, like usually you change 5 or 3. It's a huge percentage of your team. So making continuity judgments based on the name of the structures doesn't account as much. And so what's going to really entail at the end is going to be the power of the region. And so it's going to heavily favor the winner. If you win 2 worlds in a row, like your region is going to be seeded 1st to 4th immediately. And I think that doesn't reflect as well as we would like the difference between China and Korea in terms of power difference. But I would say I would still advocate for this over no seeding.
Thoughts, Keire?
So I have seen many terrible initial seedings. Thorin, you could probably remember one of the worst, the the Counter-Strike Professional Players Association, when they let the players do the seedings and stuff like that. ESL even had a tournament where the teams seeded each other, right? And I've watched esports for a long fucking time. I've even watched Korean tournaments where casters and fans seeded tournaments, right? And they were all better seeded than Worlds. All of them.
I wonder where he's going with that.
Joke.
Okay.
That's the joke.
Okay.
That's like any form of seeding is better than what. I am not joking when I say, like, Valve's madness, their esoteric fucking region swapping BO3. At least it's a super group where everyone can theoretically play against everyone else. What do you call Riot were obsessed for years with and they still are segregated groups, but also systematically tiered, but not by strength, but by region position.
Which, by the way, if you think about it in itself, is absurd, because what you're saying is, I won't tell you how good the teams are, but you have to have a team from this region in your group. Like, what? That you just said the opposite of what you just said there, but you just hate it with language, basically. It's gross, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm going to eliminate half of the teams based off of this seeding, and it's all BO1s, a format that nobody's played, right? So beyond that, I think this seeding, if Riot goes and gets good data analysts, and Riot does famously actually have like really, really smart people in terms of like data analysts and numbers. Now, that is completely different to the decision makers at Riot listening to those people. Those are completely independent like things, but they could have like basically this could be very, very appropriate like seeding in terms of it telling you how many seeds each region should be getting relative to other ones.
Yeah, that's
with
fair.
With the introduction of this additional international tournament, it could also be like an invite system of if you don't make it regionally, you get invited. It's very flexible. It can be used in a variety of different ways once you get it fixed. Again, the quicker you introduce it and the quicker it's around, the quicker you can fix it. And it can be like made better, because I think it's got to come around eventually if you do want to use it, and it will have flaws, and hopefully you can iron them out quickly as possible. The one thing that I do think is really funny, it'll be how long it'll take for the all the Asian teams to like fill out like the top 10 if they don't wait like winning EU and NA like enough, because G2 might like be able to like carry it out versus like some of the competition, because they beat like TES for example. But like if G2 like blow up and like EU goes to having no dominant team again, and all the NA and EU teams go to losing all the BO5s every single time they're going to international events. I'm not saying we're going back to like season 3, 4, 5 here, guys, but for a wee period we possibly could. What would that do to the rankings? Like how heavily would that like affect the rankings? Could you end up having something like a team that never even goes internationally from LPL being higher than EU teams, because domestically they're beating the LPL teams that are like that G2 are losing to like at the international event. So it'll be quite curious to see it. But again, I agree with you, Thorin, like quite heavily here, because again, it's been a frustration of mine since time immemorial. I think Riot's seeding system is an abysmal, it's an abomination, and it's one of the massive things that's basically ruined LoL esport for the past like decade, or made it a lesser endeavor to like watch.
Yes. By the way, 2 quick things. One, on the thing there, I also agree with that. By the way, I will just say, that's why I put the caveat in. As far as I know right now, they haven't at all said this will be used for seeding or any of that shit. Like, I'm just saying, I think this would be an obvious thing to apply it to. Yeah. Because one thing I learned about Riot Esports is the best, like a lot of human nature, the best way to get Riot to do something is make them think it was their idea. So what I'm basically telling them is, hey, this new thing you've got's pretty good. It would be a shame if you fucked around and made it for seeding. And they're like, we will. That we always planned to, Thorin. I'm like, you guys are smart. That's secretly why I went the whole time. Because basically, the two things to say is, one, the current system they use, I don't complain that much about it, but I do hate it. You know where they currently use things like who wins international tournaments for like determining the whole region's seeds? Well, the reason why that's mental is if you ever get one exceptional team, we had this in Europe, G2 in 2019, you're going to skew the whole region. Like, why should we get an extra spot? Like, essentially, why should a bunch of people who aren't G2 get an extra spot because G2 was exceptionally good? Like, spoiler, that extra team, whoever the fourth best team was, they didn't make G2 awesome. Like, to me, that's a bit flawed because you go on the top end. This would be more the whole region's performance would be what would evaluate how they do. And then actually on that latter point about the fact that, like, I agree with Zaboutine. The one problem would be if either China or Korea was overly dominant only, and then it skewed it so that, like, as we're saying, like, number one from Korea could only be number four, no matter how good they were. But I would say that's only going to be a problem if the big regions have an issue. And here's why for the smaller ones it will make more sense. Because, you know, the real problem is any European or North American fan has a natural bias to want their teams to be considered good or the room to be there. Here's why it actually makes way more sense. I'll give you the obvious example. So remember the fifth major region? It doesn't exist now. It used to be LMS, didn't it? Because they won Season 2 Worlds. Now they actually play in PCS, obviously. Right? If you take one of those teams, there's been many years in the LMS where you had, whether it was Flash Wolves or AHQ or old school TPA, you have had some very dominant domestic teams there. You've had teams there, if you don't know, have done like, you know, like 23-1 type splits and stuff and like crazy, like 15 game winning streaks, right? If I took that team and said, hey guys, this is a major region, they're smurfing on it, they should be like the fourth seed at Worlds, you'd all lose your mind. That's the same as NA now, you idiots. That's just LCS now. That would be like if TL had won every series in LCS. Now, what's funny is I would evaluate TL from the international tournaments well, but winning LCS shouldn't get them a top 4 seed, but that would have been the old system essentially. So I think as soon as you shift the regions, people get it. They get the premise on that one. Do we have another hot take? Does someone else have one? Zaboutine?
I can go.
I mean, you can go, Keire.
Okay, I'll go. Right, okay. Yeah, this actually like picks up to something that was kind of touched on earlier. But I actually think, okay.
Come on.
And Zaboutine, maybe you can. No. It's basically right. So basically, I have noticed, right, okay, if people moan and they fucking cry and they whinge, right, about there being no fucking EU talent, right? You know, tier 2 of EU is like desolate, particularly for this one role, top lane. But I don't see why that's a problem. Because it seems to be you can go get anybody, any fucker, any old grandbag, fucking terrible player to play top lane in EU and do something with them. Let's go through the checklist. We've got Oscar in, right? One of the most dysfunctional like top laners ever, right? In terms of he couldn't lane he's been in the league for 2 years. At no point in time could he ever like function in the lane. Made it to multiple finals, had all his like weaknesses like covered for. Right, we've got Merwin, who was described as someone, it was good that he played range supports because then you didn't actually have to see him play melee matchups. That's the way he was described to me by someone, right? Okay. You've then got Chasey, who played in NLC, which is the UK league. He's Korean, but there's nobody good in the UK league, right? Okay. He won a championship, by the way, right? Then we've got, who's the next one? Oh, they then went down into the depths of hell in Spain and they got fucking, what's his name?
Oh, the Antonio.
The Antonio, like, they got the
Antonio. So I even knew just from saying went into Spain, into the depths of hell, I knew he meant the Antonio. Keep going.
They went in and they got the Antonio and they're like, okay, you're going to be an EU top laner now. And he was like, sure thing. Like, they got like, so, and he can't lane either. He can barely play tier 1 League of Legends, right? But he was, and I'm an Odo fan, he was actually looking better than Odo Amne at points in the time. And Odo Amne's supposed to be one of the stalwarts of the league, right? So my question is, who can we not get to replace people at this point? Because it just seems every single.
So your hot take is anyone can play top lane in LEC.
Yes,
right.
Yes, that is literally the point, right? Okay.
Right,
Because what I used to say, right, is get all the EU mid laners, right, get them all, fucking stir them all up, right, and get them to play support. Fuck that. Get them to play top lane as well, right? So we're gonna have all the EU mids play top lane and support and mid lane in EU. That's how we're going to save EU. That's how we're going to do it. because I can't keep going on believing that, like, who's that guy Zaboutine, like Ragnar, is what they call it, I always get told about, and then when I watch his games, he's like totally fine, like totally serviceable, but instead we've got like Kana again for the 500th time playing. No.
You know, I actually, even though, look, Keire was a top laner, I will say I hadn't even thought of that. Bearing in mind, Keire can walk in. We don't even know what his level of English is. Go into one of the worst teams and actually be all right. That alone actually makes Zaboutine's point about Oner seem strong. Like, maybe Oner can just play any fucking role, mate. Like, who knows at this point in time? I didn't even know Keire was still alive,
guys.
mate. You know.
You will see.
Holy shit, just get Oner to play top.
I mean, Oner would come top. In EU, you give him like 3 months. Like right now, if he doesn't go to Worlds and he's solo queues and top lane, he's playing better than, like, I'm not even joking, guys. He plays half the tanks that can be flexed. He's gonna pick Sejuani top lane. He's gonna solo kill half of the EU league. That's how it is. I think your take is pretty mild, to be frank, because everybody in Europe already agrees with you. Like, we know our top lane is not great. Like, there is nobody's gonna be like, no man, we have, like, okay, we had Broken Blade and we I think he has improved. I don't know how he did, because I think solo queue level is pretty bad. But you just have to look at like the top laners in EU. The level is not there. Like, the problem is culturally, nobody really wants to play the lane. Nobody really wants to fight. People really like to handshake their resources. And people will always take the minimal risk decision in a way to, like, kind of not get in trouble. Because junglers don't like to play around top lane in Europe, because the bot lane is 2 people pinging 24/7 for the jungle to come. Otherwise, the game is absolutely lost, right? This is how it is. Sure. Your bot laners are just crybabies. They pick everything. Sure. If they're winning, they want you to dive. If they're losing, they want you to bail out their status. So this is how it is. And the top laners have to deal with that 24/7. So the only time they get ganked is at the end of the full clear from the blue side. He comes top and ganks. And if you cover this timing, you're pretty much on an island for the rest of the game. So top laners are absolutely not used. Like, growing up from gold to challenger, they're not used to play the game actually in a competitive manner. And if you look at the usage of the top lane in Europe, it's just different dives. Like Irrelevant, for instance, he plays, like, he started, like you said, he was just a Misfits premier, right? Like the second team of Misfits in the LFL. And when he came in, he was not great. Like, he really looked pretty bad when he started, but he improved very fast and caught up in terms of level. But the best skill of Irrelevant is like getting dove and survive. That's literally what he does the best. Like, he's playing weak side, he's defending, clearing the wave, using his flash at the last second, killing 1-for-1 is like, oh, Irrelevant's so good. But it's just culturally, we have nobody that can drive the top lane meta, because we only have one guy that's like a Broken Blade, and nobody else really wants to push for it. And especially, I think we are a mid to bot based region. And the same way we can't have carry junglers, we cannot have carry top laners, because I think in terms of locker room politics, it is impossible to convince a team that the top laner is going to carry. I don't think it's possible to come and walk to a bot lane in Europe and say, guys, you're going to play Xayah Rakan, you're going to be minus 15 CS, 2 plates down, and we're going to do 6 games tops, and we're going to dive top 3 times, and then our top laner is going to win the game out of, like, push and pull around the Baron. And you're going to start the Baron, and your top laner is going to push tier 2 and tier 3, and whenever the team is coming back, you get off the Baron, and then you stall it, and then you start again. Have you seen one team in the last 4 years, right, the last 4, doing that a single time in Europe? The only team that did that was G2 2018 to 2019, 2017 to 2018, 2019, and then it stopped forever. That's the only time in history we did that.
G2 does it a little bit now, to be fair. But when BB was on, BB's got a Camille game where they do that and stuff. I do agree. Zaboutine is a lot less. So the principle of what you're saying is correct, but it's basically just like G2 sometimes do it when BB's on like a counter pick and has strong.
By the way, you notice also what he's saying, which is accurate. By the way, sadly, the very cynical take he has on why that is just obvious, which is because players also have a lot of say and power and influence within Europe. Well, which is easier, convince one guy to be the weak side or two? Well, it's easier to convince one, isn't it? I mean, there's got less voting rights, less people to convince, and also it's just you only need one person to agree then. So sadly, that if you don't know, that's another sleeper reason why you'll never have the great carries, which have basically defined LPL and LCK for the whole time. Because the difference is their coach tells them this is what we're playing and how you're playing, and people go, okay, and just do it. Whereas I agree, they don't do that in Europe. By the way, on this point, like my cynical version is, you could have just said this, Keire. You could have just said the Antonio just played a split in LEC after like 10 years in fucking ERL, and he was all right. Case closed. Yeah, you're right. Literally anyone can play at LEC, that means, because, spoiler, he was never like a talent to come up. Well, maybe like 8 years ago or something. Like, no one was. In fact, that's why people even think in his team, my joke is that him getting to play this split was his golden watch, thanking him for his service within that org for the whole time. Like, it wasn't even really that they thought he was that good. Like, they didn't play him like, hey, if this goes well, you get a contract for next year. It was like, enjoy the split. The team's done anyway. We're cooked anyway. You may as well just play. And also, spoiler, actually, since we got Patrick in the team, we do just want a permanent weak side anyway, so just please play tank. Like, it was the most cynical move ever, but it made sense. Then also, I actually think on the other end, that's like the low end. On the high end, the reason why I sort of agree is because to me, one of the craziest, like, I still look now on paper and it doesn't make sense, is remember one of the only players who was on both of the vitalities that were bad was Photon. And he's really good. Guys, he's actually really good, especially in lane. If you told me I've got some sick Korean with really good mechanics who's going to win lane the majority of the time, I'd be like, well, he must be at least mixing it up in the playoffs. You're like, oh no, he comes last place a bunch of times. You'd be like, how's that possible? So what that shows me is teams in Europe just don't play around top lane or know how to connect to top lane. And it just doesn't matter who you have. I think you're actually low-key sort of right. I don't really know if absolutely anyone could, but I know what you mean. Because the chasey one is criminal too, Keire. How did he go from, I never heard this guy's name ever mentioned, he's in the league, he's in 2 finals and wins it, goes to both international tournaments, all pro player, and then now he's not in the league, and it's worse he's not in the league. No one even mentions his name. No one ever goes, hey, bring Chasey back. Like, no one gives a fuck about this guy. So it actually shows me, if he was one of our top laners, he got the status, he had all pro status, no one actually believes top lane's good or that important. I think you're right. Mm-hmm. And also, one last thing. Go for it. I'll come back later. Tom.
No, one thing is, and you can actually see, like, teams are also, like, don't believe in it. Like Rogue and KC might be being cheapskates and just not wanting to buy people's buyouts, because I think Summer didn't line up with the ERL, so got buyouts. So I understand that market timings are a factor in people's decision makings, guys. I'm not completely oblivious to that, but you know what I mean. Like Kana and Finn being in the league again. Now Finn, what a great broadcast talent, so well spoken. But
so he started like that, and you know it's going to be like that. Okay.
The truth starts after the but.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. Exactly.
But playing League of Legends, mate, might not be for you.
Anyway,
laning is not his best thing. I think ERL level is going to be easier for him in terms of pure laning, because outside of his champion is pretty weak. Yeah.
By the way, go on. He's my last.
I'm flaming Finn, but I shouldn't be.
I mean, who gives a fuck about him? My last point is this, because one thing I do want to flame, it's not that connected to this, but it is in a way, because we're talking about strength of top lane. I'll tell you, actually, if everyone's just seen the recent, you know what? People love to use that term. If I ever do 2 tweets in a row, people say I'm having a meltdown or a tantrum or something. Bro, then what the fuck did Whippo just have the last 3 days? Like, mate, that for real, I'm not joking, almost came off like drug psychosis. Like you got like a bad batch of Adderall, or you had some weed that fucked your head or something, and someone laced it. Like, mate, that came off for real. Like a really old, bitter war veteran with like a load of whiskey in a bar, like, this bloody country's got, like, what the fuck? It was such a, what was so weird was like the tone of it. And in amongst that, right, look, there was a million things that we could make fun of or reference, but the one I want to bring out, because it's relevant to this topic, is the weirdest diss I've ever heard. The weirdest backhanded compliment I have ever heard was when Whippo was talking about all the other great players and all the other top players, right? And explaining how, like, not many of them knew how to play in Europe. And when he came to Wonder, now here's the thing. If you're Whippo, you don't get to have an opinion about Wonder. That is your, as Kanye West would say, that is your OG, and you will respect him as such. Like, he is just better than you at everything that you do top lane, Whippo, and has been the whole time, has a way better resume, trophy cabinet, eye test, body of work, by the way, greater internationally, greater domestic, every single metric by which you wouldn't be able to talk shit to him, he beats you. But the way you found a way to talk shit is, I think, one of the maddest takes I've ever heard. What he suggested, Keire, was, well, he's not that good now, is he? He was only good. By the way, there's no only good for Wonder's prime. His prime was probably the best, except maybe so as we've ever seen from our region, or the West in general. There's no only. Like, you've never, if that's only Whipple, then you've never done that ever. You've never even only done that. You had your 1 year where you were Soaz's backup and Caps and Reckless carried your ass. But the worst thing about it was he implied the only reason he was good during those G2 years is because I was there to push him. Now, that is the maddest shit talk I've ever heard, guys. Think about this shit talk. Imagine me and you are rivals, right? We're rivals at the top of our field, and I keep beating you, not just because I'm on a better team, because I'm actually better than you. I just beat you. And you go, oh, yeah? Well, maybe you are better than me, but only because you have to beat me. It's like, even within your internal logic, you're admitting you're worse than me. I think it's just an aside, but that just shows how bad top player was. I sort of agree with Whippo in general. That just shows how bad the takes are. Like, even people who actually are better than you, you're like, yeah, but that's like technically my credit. It's like, no, you got that wrong there. That's actually Wonder's credit for being better than you and beating you. I still don't even really know what Whippo's point was on that one. I feel like listen, I've done this before. He'd fired so many shots out of his gun that when he then came to a target, it wasn't applicable to fire on. He was like, yeah, but I'm having fun firing shots, aren't I? So he just kept firing. He just kept firing the machine gun. And he didn't realise every now and then there comes one take where it's like, I better let that guy off actually. That's totally out of bounds. So just an aside, I thought that was the maddest shit talk I've ever heard because I don't really get what the shit talk is. Like, yeah, well, you did beat me, but only because you played me. It's like, what? What does that even mean though? Like, it's such a weird shit talk anyway. Do we have one more take? Is there something else?
Yeah, and I have a related hot take. First of all, I want to say that I've seen a lot of people from the scene saying, oh, thanks for speaking up. I think there is a lot of food for thoughts. I was like, I don't think there's a lot of food for thoughts because if there is a food for thoughts, you should actually make a pretty edited video, write a script, find an editor, voice your concerns, and try to better the thing. Yeah. You just don't like randomly babble things on your stream if you're really concerned about the outcome because you're gonna hurt a lot of people in the process. So my take is that FlyQuest will do 0-3 and get outside of groups. I think the FlyQuest that I've seen this year, and it's one of the few teams I've been watching, has been playing very inconsistently over the course of the year. I think that there are games where Bwipo is playing out of his mind and he's the best player in the team. And the next game, he's absolutely inting the thing. You feel like he's been, it's like match fixing level of inting, and you're like, what is Bwipo doing?
Yes.
And the rest of the team drags him along the finish line, and you're like, oh, FlyQuest, the LCS game makes it.
I never even thought of that. It is true. Like, Bwipo is one of the only players where if the nameplate was on, I couldn't even tell if he was match fixing. How could I ever know? Like, he's just done real plays that just would look like the most egregious. You're right. I would. He's impervious to allegations. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I personally think Bwipo is a good League of
Legends he's a good player, of course.
But I think that if you look at the showcase of his performance over the course of a year, there is plenty of games where question mark, right? And I think that this team never really plays as one man. It's usually one side of the map wins, the other side of the map kind of loses or loses hard. Then it's kind of outbalanced by Inspired playing the fireman all across the map and trying to salvage situations. I think that the pacing of LCS always allows a team to have 2 or 3 shots in a game because nobody's like snowballing fast enough for a team to not have at least 1 or 2 comebacks opportunities, which I think is going to be way faster at Worlds. Nobody who you play in the group stage with the Swift system. And I think that there is a significant reason to think that if they lose their first match and they start being drawn with like all the middle of the pack teams, right? Because you're only protected at your first match, you're going to end up with like G2, Fnatic, you're going to have Weipo, you're going to have LNG. All these teams on the paper look much better than FlyQuest in my book, and I don't see them winning against any of them. So the only reason they will actually win a game is if they actually been drawn against a playing team, which I think is maybe likely eventually, but not even against a playing team that plays at their best. I don't think that FlyQuest is very protected. In comparison to Team Liquid, which I think has been probably the peak of Team Liquid, especially during the summer split, has not been as good as FlyQuest, and that's why they lost against them. I think, as I say, that the floor matters a lot when you play in an international tournament, and I think the floor of Team Liquid, their macro, their understanding of side laning, the impact as a top laner, the fact that Shen got buffed, plenty of reasons that makes Team Liquid a much better team because they are way more versatile and way more structured, whereas I think that it has been a lot of like one-off for one part of the team, and at an international tournament where most of the players are just going to be beaten one-on-one on their lane and they're going to feel the pressure, I don't think that Inspire is going to be allowed to play the firefighter and salvage both sides of the map at once, because I think that on some games, both the bot lane and the top lane are going to be overwhelmed, which has never really happened locally.
What do you think on that, Keire? Come on.
So see, the thing is, it's like I actually just do not enjoy watching FlyQuest as a team, but I do enjoy watching TL as like a team. And so you're saying they're going to 0-3 out of groups in the group stage. See, 0-3 is so hard because you always catch a shitter. You always catch some wee fucking.
I mean,
terrible...
basically, they can't have it where, like, you know, when you go to the 0-1 game, you can't get lucky and get like Gam and then beat them 1-0.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
You're gonna get them DK.
Okay, it can happen.
You're gonna get right. Or
Can
PSG.
Yeah,
you're gonna like losing to the first team. I don't know who they are. Like Weibo, they lose to Weibo, and then they play I don't know, Damwon, and then the third team is PSG. This scenario?
See, the thing is I can't even say it's hot because you come with such good reasoning. Because when I actually look at the seeding right now, they have to actually basically just catch like TL or Fnatic, right? Because Fnatic could fucking lose to anybody, right? That's their special power. So yeah, as long as they don't like, if you look at the rest of the field, if they don't have basically Fnatic or TL, they're going out. They're more likely than not. That's kind of bonkers actually to consider. Their best matchup is like Mad Lions, Fnatic, and TL in a BO3 elimination match. Those are their best matchups. That's actually kind of bonkers, to be honest. It sounds really crazy in its preface, but when you actually think about it, it's really unlikely because they're going to be a seed one, one of the seed 1 like teams, and pool 1 teams, and they're going to pool. So they're most likely going to go 0-1. Then you go look at the losers. All the losers are going to be fucking sick, and 0-2 is like really likely. And so it's basically whoever they pull in the 0-3. It's not that unlikely. And the thing is, like. My problem with like FlyQuest is it's so predicated on the top side. Like the top side must perform, and you can abuse an NA and AU weak top sides. But the minute you come up against some of the like the motherfuckers from the east, it's like the top sides are stacked as fuck. The worst top side is like HLEs, and it's still like Zeka, Peanut, Thorin, and it's only because Doran's there. Like it's still unbelievable. So. Yeah, like Zaboutine, I actually am more inclined to agree with you. Like I was kind of like glazing it over, but it's actually not that bad. I don't think many people would even like consider like that kind of angle for it, to be honest.
The problem is, whenever you think of worlds, this is why I also told people Swiss will just break everyone's brain with narratives. There's two things over the last couple of years have ruined the world's narratives. One is when LPL and LCK both had 4 teams, because it's like that no longer means unless you get a lucky draw like NRG, anyone from the West should get out. Like basically, unless you have like, it has to be a TR or a G2 where we believe they're actually like top 4. Unless you really believe they're like insanely good, no Western team should ever get out of the group stage anymore. That was an old thing from when there was 2 or 3 teams from the other regions. And then secondly, as well as that, I also think people forget that in the new system, because they've even also, I think, made the play-ins more sturdy, there's just not those shit teams. Like, if the point we're saying here is, let's say SoftBank Hawks made it this time. They'd have had to have beaten some good teams though, guys, like actual real squads. In the past, to get there, they could have just had the lucky group and played nobody and been they themselves would be the one that ensure you can't go 0 to anything, wouldn't they? So I agree with you, Zaboutine. Essentially, I actually think not only is your take good, you'd actually almost have to, like I say, get unlucky for it not to happen. Basically, I think they'd almost have to get the best possible draw, like we're saying at the 0-2 game, just to, by the way, not even to guaranteed win the game, but just to not have this be the case. So I think the real problem is people are going to think, this is why I was laughing when you said it, because I did realise the one flaw with making this show, because I don't have to think about regions when I'm on the other game, because in Counter-Strike there's only really America and Europe, and I have Maui Snake who's from North America. I forgot that even though you coached in the LCS, to anyone American, this does just come off as like 3 Europeans say our champion of our region is shit, will go 0-3.
And that's the worst. Is I have a lot of appreciation for a lot of people in these orgs, right? Like the coach of 100 Thieves is is Golden Glue, is a really good friend of mine. I mean, I really appreciate him.
Oh, fair enough.
I mean, at FlyQuest there is Papa Smithy that I think he's done a pretty good job. Former LCK caster and stuff. There is plenty of people within the NA scene that I really respect. Even NRG, I had Soaz working there, and Croissant was my former assistant coach, and he was directing a lot of operation. I don't have any hate for NA. I just observe, like, I know that it's a lot of hot takes, because I know that the perception of NA from NA and the reality of NA from the rest of the world is very different. And already I think EU is pretty hard to test proof against Asia, but I think for NA the barrier is so huge that Team Liquid is already a miracle of a team that they can like produce one team that's that good from this region. And so I think there is kind of a reality check that's going to happen for these teams.
And here's the funny thing. Before the playoffs, I was actually wondering myself on the whole quad thing, like, could this guy actually do anything? Actually, I'll give him credit. He actually looks like he has hands. Like, he actually has, like, some talent. So maybe he could be all right. But, bro, in this team, I'll just say it right now, support and top, fucking Busio and Whipple will feed at this tournament. I promise you it, guys. Like, it's so set up for that to happen. Not least because, I know this is a random side detail, but I actually do feel like, in a weird way, it's because Whipple just won the championship that he's unleashed all these crazy thoughts. That was going on the whole time inside this guy's head. Like, that was that those sorts of crazy fucking intrusive thoughts were rattling around this guy's fucking head. Like someone just shot a BB gun inside of a fucking steel tin roof shanty house or something. Although I guess actually I could have done someone workshopped that. I could have done a much funnier joke to do with a BB gun and done something about Broken Blade there, but whatever. I haven't got time. I get my writing crew on that one. That'll come back on a different show as a much better joke with a whole punchline and proper phrasing and everything. So no, I sort of agree with this one. I think it's actually not that spicy once you do the analysis. One like better takes, but it's a good hot take in the sense that, like I say, I think on the surface, just if anyone thinks, wait a minute, the champions of LCS can't win a single game, that would be a great headline. That's going to sound straight fire. It's not implausible though. I actually think, by the way, it's why I'm so sad that it is Swiss that they chose to switch for Worlds. Because people don't know, like, the only way I like Swiss is my least favourite format is round robin BOX, which is what they had before. So it's a better format than that. But as someone who hates the way they do it in the CS majors, I also wish it was just like seeded GSL groups, basically. Like, I would much prefer. Also, by the way, it plays better into League because you can prep for the opponent and know who you're going to play and all that. Whereas you can't ever know. You just know the next day who you're playing in the Swiss system. So I do think there's a lot of flaws. But the difference is, I actually do think people forget that, like, because we've made the teams better and the way you qualify better, I do think the actual overall group stage is way harder now than it was before. I mean, it wasn't hard in the sense before you could get lucky in your group, but that's what we're talking about on this take as well. We're not saying FlyQuest can get really unlucky and go 0-3. We're actually pointing out that, like, actually a lot of scenarios, like Doctor Strange style, in almost most scenarios, they probably go 0-3. I don't think that's even that unfair. That's totally plausible. Yeah. Right. Is there another hot take? Do we have one more? One more for today?
I've got one last one. It's actually pretty quick. I think it was Emily Rand that I seen was talking about it, or somebody replying to Emily Rand on Twitter, because basically it was.
I'm already excited because I don't know if Emily Rand has ever had a hot take in her entire life, bro. You know what I mean? No, like, so hit me with it. Hit me with what it is.
And basically, it was some person like praising and being happy that GenG lost finals because it was proof that super teams aren't working. And I just kind of sat there and I was kind of like, and then I went into it, and there's this massive narrative in League right now where, like, the whole idea of, like, super teams don't work. And then I began to realise this kind of worked all the way up to about 2018 where KT, like, didn't win World, right? And then almost every other, like, super team after that either done really, really well or were, like, era-defining the best team. So you've got, like, G2, don't even need to talk about it. The first Europeans to do, like, anything. GDG, who were actually like a super team, like, you know what I mean, candidate for best team of all time. This year you have that one. What do you call it? You have GenG, right? Who, like, they are by the way, already unprecedented. Winning a split, coming second, winning an MSI is better than most people's careers.
Yeah, of course.
Like, right? Okay, it's just because the concentration of talent makes the expectation they should win everything. But by the way, Humble Life is just shy. Most super teams aren't actually super. Missing was never considered the best support in China, right? The same way as, like, by the way, you could take HLE and you can put Viper, Delight, who was considered the second best, Peanut, the perennial,
that could be a
some
super
people
team,
consider the best. They're almost a super team, shy of Thorin, and from a Korean perspective, Thorin is like a superstar, by the way, because he's just
also a champion too.
Yeah. So, like, what do you call it? So, like, HLE are like a super team.
Oh, by the way, you can even argue Zeko's a world champion on paper. That could be a super team, right? Yeah.
Like, so, like, you have all these, like, things, and then it's all, I think, they then win the split, and that's it. And by the way, if you look at the rumoured money that HLE spent on the roster, it might as well be called a fucking super team, by the way, at that point, right? Now, caveat here, it hasn't worked, it didn't work in C9 and the West, you know what I mean? It blew up in their face when that was their attempt at a super team. But again, I think that one's less tenable, because, for example, you have rookie top laner, and you have, who doesn't even speak the language, and you have support player who I don't actually think at any point in time was ever considered that. But let's just say that. But how is, like, one thing failing evidence that they don't work. It's like, right now, like, the evidence is, as a super team is, if you actually get the best players, not the regional best
players.
Hot
take is super teams do work.
Yeah, super teams do work, because it's actually about getting the best players, and you put them all together in a concentrated area. Not the best regional players, but the actual just best players. And it works like a motherfucker. Like, it's actually unbelievable how regularly it works. Like, the proof of the pudding, like, most of, like, the actual super teams are, like, dynastic, won 3 out of 4, 2 out of 4, like, teams. And it's, like, unprecedented how much they work. Now, there is obviously a financial cost to them, and some people, like, hate them in terms of, like, the amount of winning that they do. But the whole idea is that, like, they don't work. I think it's actually, like, farcical, and people have completely skewed the narrative on them.
I think the worst part is the understanding of what a super team is, because people base the level of players on their achievement and their name and their fan base instead of their level. In a sense, I have a good friend. His name is Mephisto. Maybe you heard of him, right? And he has his data. He has a data company that's based on rating the level of players among the solo queue system for their region, right? If you look at GenG across the board, every single player, if you take the last information I had from him was during the spring split, every single player was ranked first at his position within the solo queue system. So GenG is a super team that's based off the 5 best players at their position. So therefore, it's a super team. If you look right now, the best player in solo queue is Viper. Surprisingly, they won title, right? Like, he has 2,000 LPs, is the best player. So super teams are not the super team that you saw in Vitality, which is Alphari coming back from NA, Perks coming back from NA. Then we're going to get Self-Made that has a very hard time slotting in teams where he cannot have self-expression. And then we're going to just fit with like a super good names bot lane, and we're going to hope it's going to work. Super teams are still need to be defined with players that can play together. But it is for 100% that if you take the best player at each position, even if they don't really know how they want to play together, which I think has been the case for GenG from January to, I would say, after MSI. I think MSI was kind of the gluing factor for them. They still win because they win 3 lanes and the jungle can take half the map, and then the game is over. So I think that the problem is people think that super team don't work because they take the example of Vitality or Cloud9. But I don't think that if I take the solo queue rankings of all the players at Cloud9 within even the NA system, I don't think that they beat individually by a landslide the players that actually won. And I think that, for instance, the APA is probably the best ranked mid laner in NA. I'm pretty sure that Impact is the best top laner in NA. So I would say that Team Liquid, for that reason, is a super team, and therefore they're winning. So I think super teams are winning, but what people consider super teams out of names and achievement is kind of a intellectual mistake that a lot of people do, and then they say super team don't work. But it's just like what you were in the past doesn't work. Otherwise, Heretics would have won the title.
I will say, I'll take it all the way back to Keire's initial point, which is the flaw there, as you pointed out, is they're actually defining as doesn't just win every single tournament, which is obviously a crazy straw man, because spoiler, by that logic, are you ready? No team ever worked in League of Legends. Because that's the worst part about that logic, Keire, is the best possible argument that person could then make as a follow-up is, but check out this team who didn't have a super team and they won everything. It never happened. It never happened, guys. Like, you know, although, by the way, in a way, the reason I agree that, like, super teams aren't always the absolute best is, if you notice, almost any of those SKT lineups that won Worlds, any of them, I don't think any of those were like the best players in every role. And I think actually a lot of them were flawed or had like 1 or 2 really super carries, and they had like role players that worked well, etc. It's why actually over time, one area I think I've won and beaten a lot of people in the consensus is I was always the hater of most of the role players. I always thought Bengi wasn't the best jungler ever. I always thought Marin was overrated as a top player. I thought Bang was never Uzi or deft. And I'll tell you what, all I'm going to say is my takes have aged pretty well on that one, but people were hating me for like 3 or 4 years, bro, because at the time, it just looked like I'm saying a guy who's in Bang who's just won 2 world championships in a row, he's chopped liver. You could have put anyone there, which I'm not saying, but I'm saying he was never Uzi, he was never deft, he was never the absolute king of the game. So first of all, it is crazy because by their logic, no teams work, bro. Like even teams that don't have super teams and build cleverly in a very clever and great macro, even they don't win every single tournament because obviously the problem here is no one's ever done the Grand Slam. And by the way, please G2, don't keep calling winning all of LEC the Grand Slam. That term, we've reserved that for fucking International League, guys. Why are you saying that? Because you won all the LEC titles. That's the LEC slam, you fucks. Stop saying Grand Slam. That doesn't get to count for that. And then secondly, I'll just say this. On Zaboutine's point, that's actually why, as someone who works in media and content, the whole problem with the term super team is people don't actually look what is the definition, first of all. As far as I know, the American sports terminology for super team like that is just supposed to mean the opposite of what Zaboutine said, actually. It's supposed to mean you made a team where the names looked super. And so it's actually just, it's essentially, this is a very key point to make. It's supposed to just be about what your expectations would be on paper when you see the lineup. So a famous example is, I'm a fan of the Lakers. In 2004, the Lakers made a team where they had Shaq and Kobe in their prime, and then they brought two legendary players, Karl Malone, the power forward, and Gary Payton. And so they had 4 Hall of Famers, like future Hall of Famers, in the same team. The problem with that is, in the game, in the basketball, they weren't the best team, because the two people they brought in were like 37 years old, or, you know, something like that. Like, they were only super by their name, but they weren't that guy anymore. They weren't the guy they would have been 10 years earlier, when they would have been the best at their role. So I definitely agree. On Zaboutine's point, if you want to make it a super team, as in you're actually seeing this is like a Avengers, like the best, then they better all be top players. And also, it can't just be that, like, when someone says super teams don't work, yeah, that's because you can't just go, I'll just take a random top laner without looking. So I'll have Whippo, he just won LCS, and then we're going to go, obviously Yike won in Europe, and then I guess I'm going to take, like, if I make this team, that team might never function. Like we're saying, it might be like a no weak side team, it might be a team that's all in team. But if the premise goes that if you put together these big names, people will expect a lot from them. Even if they fail, that doesn't mean they weren't a super team. That means they were a failed super team. So I think that's an interesting discussion. I do think there's a lot of like terminology stuff there.